Okay, so today we are going to start on our watercolor for this project. You're taking out your folder, you're taking out your project, and you're actually going to take all of your papers other than your final paper project, put that final paper project right on top of your multicolor paper that's thicker that you use kind of as a folder. Put these other papers back in your bag. And when you're going into your bag, you're gonna get out your watercolors. And then, depending on where we are, if we're at home, you'll have to go fill up a water cup. And if we're at school, we're gonna figure out distribution of those water cups. So you have your watercolors right over here. Then you're going to go and fill up your water cup. So your water cup will look a little different in school, but I just have a small little bin for my water. You can notice how there's not much water in it. You don't need a lot of water, and we're gonna set that aside. I'm also going to grab a paper towel in case I need it, and for my brush, and put that on the other side. Getting out your crayons as well. We might use those in this process. So you have all of your papers and your materials set up for today. I have my crayons on the top right-hand side here, ready to go if I need them. Now, you have a brush in your watercolor area. This brush has this little thing on top. You're gonna take that little plastic thing off and you're gonna put it right in the watercolor where the paintbrush typically goes, and you have your brush here. Now, you're going to take a little bit of water. You're going to watch me first though, watching this first time so I can explain some things, and then you'll be able to start to paint. So watching first, not doing. We are going to take our paintbrush and dip it in a little bit of water, and notice how I'm not squishing down that paintbrush. I'm not giving it a bad hair day. If your paintbrush has a bad hair day, it'll start to look like this. And we don't want our paintbrushes to look like this. It'll have this weird, and all the hairs will be sticking out. So making sure you're not doing that with your brush. You're just gonna dip in a little bit of water. Decide what color you want. So I'm gonna start with my blue color here and add a little bit of blue to that, to my paintbrush. Also notice how I'm not pushing down and making the hairs go all over the place. You just need a little bit of color for this, a little bit of color on your paintbrush. Now I'm gonna start painting. Now what I want to show you is that it's okay if you go outside the lines a little on yours. And watercolor dries pretty fast here. And you can see as I'm using it, it gets lighter and lighter. Now, if you add more water, it's also going to get lighter. Now, if I want to switch colors, what I'm going to do, you're not going to move your water cup, but I'm moving it so you can see it. Does your water cup stay in place on your mat or on your table? Yes, you never move your water cup. Then I'm just gonna rinse it out and see how it's nice and clean again, and I'm gonna go back in and get a different color that I want. So I wanna make a purpley color. And how do I make purple? Yeah, that's right, blue and red. So I'm gonna come into this red and I'm gonna add a little bit to the blue, and I'm gonna have to mix it pretty well to make that purple color. But you can see it coming out there. And I can also remove some of this color. Another interesting thing I can do is I can paint lines and designs with my paintbrush. So I could actually go back in over top and do, maybe I wanted to do a darker color so we could see that. And you can go back over and paint those lines on top. All right, so now it's your turn, and I want you to make sure that you're being very careful. If you need to wipe off or clean off your brush, in between you can dip it in the water, make sure it's all clean, making sure you're giving it a really good hair day, and you can just pat it on the side. You might not need to do that because your brush is very thin and it doesn't hold too much water, so that's good. And then you're going to fill out your entire paper with your colors. You want to make sure that you're not coloring or you're not mixing your colors in the palette because they will get really dirty. If you want to mix colors, make sure you're doing it on the paper. So I'm going to add this one in, and you can start to see how it's getting that purpley color. And I'm just going to start by filling out the whole area. I'm not focusing too much on getting out of the lines, and this is a really good idea for when I have my placemat underneath, because the colors, they do mix a little bit and they get sometimes all over the place. It is washable, but we still want to make sure we're being pretty clean. Now I'm going to continue and color in the rest of my paper, and you are going to do the same, making sure you're filling out the whole area. And then we're going to come back and add our details. So go ahead and doing that. You can see the more pigment or the more color you put on the brush, the darker your colors are. And sometimes you'll have to go in for more water because your brush will get a little dry. And you can also see, which is pretty cool, how sometimes if you colored hard enough or put enough color down with your crayon, it'll go away from those little lines and those little spots. So what I want to show you on this next one is, I'm going to put my paintbrush, clean it off so that it doesn't dry with that on it, and put my paintbrush down, and I'm going to break out my crayons. Now, I'm going to use a purple color, or actually, we're going to go with yellow so that you can see it a little bit better. And the yellow can serve as like the light of sun that's going through the water that we sometimes have. So I'm coloring, pressing down a little bit harder than I normally would, still without breaking the crayon. I'm coloring down and I'm putting down that yellow. And this is why I said you might want to add a little more details with your crayons in the last class. So I have that down. I'm going to put my crayon away so I don't lose it. And then I'm going to go back with a color, and I'm going to choose blue this time. And you can see in some spots that yellow starts to show through and it kind of beads away from the area. Depending on what types of crayons you have, sometimes this works better or worse, and you can see how it's turning green. Does anyone know why it would be turning green? That's right, because blue and yellow make green. Now we can also go on top of ours with crayon when it's dry and make these interesting little designs. But I also like how I'm doing a little bit of a gradient. So at this one side, it's darker, and then it gets lighter and lighter and lighter, and that'll make for a really cool mask. I'm gonna move this up so you can see it a little bit better. Sorry about that. All right. Now, again, just continuing and moving on to color in the rest of your piece with your watercolors. And you can see I didn't clean my brush out well enough in this area and it started to bleed. So you want to make sure you clean your brush out pretty well without damaging its hair. And I'm gonna do some yellow in here too, just to mix up some of the colors. And I want you to take your time. Oh, whoops, I did that again. Don't mean to do that. And these are yours, but you also don't want to have to change that color all the time. I'm gonna keep going, do that again, and maybe experiment with like the weight of the watercolor. Or the designs that I'm creating on here. Add some blue and see what happens, some blue little dots to the yellow. Making sure you're working on yours and thinking about your concept or your item that you chose. If you chose your favorite animal, what that would look like, what kind of hair, what kind of fur that animal might have. I'm gonna experiment a little bit and see what color this is. Hey, it's purple. I didn't realize that was the purple color. Well, that's helpful too. Even though I know how to make purple, it's nice to have a purple on hand without mixing it. And I can add that maybe to some of the other areas. Making sure you're covering that entire area. And when you're switching colors, you're rinsing out your brush. Making sure you don't forget the mask part of yours. I'm gonna do mine in a blue color. Another really important thing to remember is to make sure that you don't wet your paper too much. Now this paper can hold a decent amount of watercolor, but if you have too much on your paper, it will start to break. So make sure you're not going over an area too much because you don't want your watercolor or your paper to have a hole in it. Now I'm going to go back into other areas and add some more details that I think would look pretty cool on my project. And if you make a mistake, it's all right. Don't worry too much about that. It might even be a good idea to do your background in case you want to add a little more, or if you have some extra time. Now I'm going to let you finish up with this And I'll see you in a few minutes when we are finished with our watercolor. All right, so now that our pieces are pretty much finished, you have all your details you want in there, and you're ready to go, what we're going to do is make sure that our brush is clean and get ready to get cleaned up. Now this watercolor doesn't take very long to dry, especially since we're using just a little bit of water. We're not using too much water. You're going to clean out your brush in the water that you have, and we're going to wipe our brush just very gently on the paper that we have. And it's okay that your brush is a little darker here. And you're gonna put that back in the side of your watercolor pan. Now, if there's a lot of water along your table or along the side, use that paper towel to wipe that up. And then you're going to close your watercolor and you're going to put it back in your bag. Now, if you're at home and your watercolor is all really, really watery, like the whole thing is covered with water, I'd suggest you leave it out and let it dry. But if we're in school, you're gonna have to put it back in your bag. So that's also why we're trying not to use too much water. All right, so moving your paper out of the way here, putting our crayons away because we are finished with those, having them all in the box there and putting them in our bags that I have just off the corner here. Then your placemat shouldn't be too wet. If it is really wet, you're gonna fold it, or actually no, you're gonna keep it open and you're gonna keep your artwork like this, and you're gonna have to carry this back to your classroom with your artwork drying on top here. If you finished a little bit early and yours is already dry, feel free to put it in your bag. But if you're doing that, you need to close your folder over top and put it in your bag like this. Now, if it's not dry and you do that, it will stick and it will stain your folder here. So, our two options, making sure our name is still on there. I covered the miss part by accident. But if you're in school, you're going to put it on top of your placemat and carry your bag in your one hand and your placemat and your paper in your other hand back to the classroom. Now we're socially distanced, so we're 6 feet apart. So you shouldn't have a problem running into each other. You just have to make sure that you're paying attention and doing the best you can. If you are at home, just place your paper and artwork in that safe spot that we talked about at the beginning of classes, and you're going to place it off to the side. Now, we are ready and finished for the day, so wait for instructions from your teacher or post a photo of your artwork online.